Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the ADV, or Andre de Villiers mini Pathfinder, a very, very cool, very robust mini knife, right? Really cool. I'm a big fan of ADV knives, and I have been for a long time. And Women Carry Knives and a Therapeutic Edge right here on YouTube were kind enough to send me a whole bunch of their ADV knives. So if you've never checked out either of these channels, you definitely should. Literally leave this review, go check them out, go subscribe to them, and then come back. It's just more amazing knife content for you guys to enjoy. So thank you so much for sending this and your other wonderful ADVs along. I'd also like to thank, of course, my generous patrons for supporting me. If you'd like to check out my Patreon and get your hands on some of these cool stickers, there is a link down in the description. It's absolutely because of them that I'm able to bring you guys daily knife content. So the support would mean the world to me. Overall length of the ADV Mini Pathfinder coming in at 7.5, maybe just over 7.6 inches overall. Blade length coming in at about 3.3. Cutting edge coming in at about 3 1/8. This knife feels much larger than it actually is, and that is because it is very robust. I'm going to do some size comparisons here real quick up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. The Rat 1 coming in at 8.6 inches overall. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? PM2 coming in at 8.3 inches overall. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in at 8 inches overall. And last but not least, the Spyderco Para 3. Spyderco Para 3 coming in at 7.25 inches overall. So you can see there it's kind of in between the Para 3 and the Benchmade Griptilian. How's the action on this guy? This is running on bearings, and it is an ADV. Anybody that's held an ADV or flipped it before knows that the detents are tuned incredibly well. I'll let you guys take a look at this here real quick. Click. Love that clickiness. Flipper tab is expertly designed. It's very easy to engage in a push button or light switch, approach, I guess. It does take just a little teeny tiny bit of encouragement to shake shut, but very solid, very clicky, very satisfying to deploy this knife. I have no issues with it whatsoever. Really, really happy with that. The ADV knives in general will be linked down in the description where you guys can check out a whole bunch of his work if you've never checked them out. And if you haven't given them a look given his knives a look in a while, definitely go take a look. He's got a lot of new models. These are expensive. You might call them ultra high-end production or mid-tech, right? These are definitely expensive American-made knives, but if you're used to purchasing knives in that caliber and you kind of know what goes into them, this might be something you'd be interested in. Let's do a hardware check on this guy. Get my handy-dandy WIA bit selector and WIA magnetic driver, two items that are very recommendable and very inexpensive. You can find them down in the Amazon store that I reference at the beginning of every single video. Just pull open the store and look for knife maintenance. I'm pulling out a T20 today because this pivot is gigantic. I can't remember if it's T20. It's one step below that. I took one look at that and I was like, God, that is a big pivot. Let's try a T15 here real quick. Big old pivot. Yeah. T15 on the pivot, and then your hardware screws are likely, or your handle screws are likely T8. So let's get that guy out here real quick. They could be T10. We'll check. T8. Yeah. So also pocket clip screws. Are they T8? No. Pocket clip screws are going to be T6. And probably the, over treble stop screws are going to be T6. Now, you take a look at this. So the head inside there is a little bit smaller. That might actually be T8 or T6. But here's why I'm okay with that. This has like a double adjustable pivot that allows you to tune the action. I remember this. I used to have a Butcher back in 2014 after seeing it on Jim Skelton's channel. And it allows you to crank on the pivot from one side, but then the other side, you get in there, and I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it's essentially two different screws that are adjusting the action. And this allows you to tighten things down and get the blade center and exactly the action that you're looking for, right? If you want the blade perfectly centered and you want a stiffer action, which some people do actually want because they don't want the blade just absolutely falling shut on their fingers. Actually, the way that it is right now is how I prefer it. Some people do want that glassy fall shut action, and I can prove that that's possible because I've got another Pathfinder right here that is actually tuned that way and will fall shut, right? It's just a larger Pathfinder, which we're going to look at here in a sec. But yeah, that's really cool. I love that you can do that with these knives. I mean, it's so frustrating to have a knife that's like, well, I got the blade centered, but it's like super stiff and it won't. Or, you know, the blade is super fall shut, but it's not centered, right? Well, actually, you can get it that way with these knives, and I always appreciated that with my ADV. So that's really, really cool. That's reason enough right there. If you like the look of this and you're okay with spending the money on it, to me, that's reason enough right there to pick one up. I mean, I love that. I love being able to adjust, you know, and get the action exactly the way that I want it. That's really, really cool. Carry profile. This is not a thin knife, but I wouldn't call it massively overbuilt. You can see there, you know, we're coming in pretty thick, quite a bit thicker than the Para 3. And in terms of overall height and length up against the PM2 and Para 3, two knives that have awkward carry profiles that nobody ever complains about. You can see there it's a little bit, well, it's about the same length overall as the Para 3. And it's nowhere near as long as the PM2. It's nowhere near as tall as either of them either. You do have quite a prominent flipper tab. It's not insane. It is a pretty big flipper tab, but even at maximum height right here, it's still shorter than PM2 and Para 3. If you carry other things in your pocket, that flipper tab might cause a problem. If you don't carry anything else in your knife pocket, then whatever. It's a flipper tab, right? So, you know, just consider that for what it's worth. This is full titanium, and the blade stock thickness is, I mean, this is a pretty tanky knife, right? For it being not, you know, not a huge knife. Blade stock thickness is coming in at 155 thousandths. We've got some pretty thick titanium, though there are these holes in here do help reduce the weight a little bit, but you can see on the other side there's no milling. There's no milling outside of those holes right there. And those holes are not always present. It depends on what style you get. If you look at ADV knives, you'll quickly notice that there are a lot of different options. I'm not going to say every single one of his knives is completely unique, but it sure does seem like he's got a lot of different interesting ones. So weight on this guy's coming in over 5 ounces. So again, you're looking at like 3 1/8 to 3 1/4 on the blade length, and you're looking at 5 ounces on this guy. For me, the carry profile is fine. I wear jeans. I don't carry anything else in my pocket other than my knife. So this is perfectly acceptable to me, being somebody who likes to carry knives between 4 and 6.5 ounces because I like the heft. I like knowing that the knife is there. However, there are a lot of people who go by the ounce and inch thing, or maybe they wear different style pants, or maybe they just don't like an overly cumbersome knife, in which case this knife might be a little bit chunky and a little bit heavy for you, but I would not call it on the insane side. I would say the majority of people are not going to have a problem carrying this knife because it really isn't that big of an object. Anyways, did we go over everything? Yeah, I think we did. Let's go ahead and talk about the anatomy here. So on this particular version, we have a very like aggressive sort of concrete tumbled finish, right? And then the blade, it looks like it might be laminate. And that's really cool, but it's not actually. It's a bead blasting, and then down here, you know, past these waves, we have this sort of machine satin belt finish, and it looks really cool. I actually really, really like how that looks. I like the look of actual laminate steel, and I believe in this case, this is what he was going for with the aesthetic, and it's nice. I mean, this is a finish that you get to enjoy aesthetically that doesn't slow the knife down in any way. You know, it's not like creating a cumbersome experience while you're cutting or anything like that. So that's really, really cool. There's a lot of different patterns and things you can get on these knives, and they have like the chevrons, they've got texturing, right? They've got the holes, there's a whole bunch of different things. And then as you can see by this large one here, this large trail boss, they do a lot of different crazy finishes. We've got the high machine satin belt finish, and then we've got like, it's like polished black DLC, and then this frag texturing, which is just incredible, and then this iridescent anodizing on the pivot and back here on the backspacer and all the different hardware. Yeah, like they do so many different setups, and obviously, the more crazy that it gets, the more colors and things, right? Some finishes are going to cost more money, so the price does go up and up and up and up, right? But if you're looking for something special, like if you really like the overall profile and appearance of this knife, you can get some pretty crazy stuff. And it used to be that ADV knives were like, a few would pop in and they would be gone immediately. I remember that's how it was in 2014. Anymore, there's still fairly small batch, but he makes a lot more of them. So there's always something available. If you go to Blade HQ right now, you can browse through a whole bunch of different ADV knives, and there's a lot of really cool stuff to look at. I'm not going to say everything that he makes is aesthetically appealing, but this is really cool. I've always found that and oftentimes it is actually the same handle profile. It's just different texturings, different patterns, and then the blade shape on this Pathfinder is its own thing. And then they've got kind of like a Bowie, and they've got the Butcher, and they've got the it's not the War Horse. The War Cleaver, Battle Cleaver, maybe something like that. Whole bunch of really, really cool aggressive blade shapes. But this guy, this sort of fullered drop point blade, this is probably the most straightforward and most functional blade shape in my opinion. Maybe save the clip point, right? All the blade shapes that he's got are wonderfully sharpened. They're really, really cool looking, and they're definitely gonna serve a purpose. But I think this is probably, in my opinion, the most well-rounded blade shape in terms of EDC. We've got quite a bit of thickness being carried all the way out to the tip. This is a very, very robust blade. Not going to need to worry about anything in the way of durability. Here you've got a nice fuller, which isn't going to be much of a gunk trap. I mean, truthfully, I just think it makes the blade look nice. The blade would appear otherwise very, very plain. You can get your finger underneath that fuller at the very bottom and do sort of a reverse flick, right? It's truthfully just a lot more comfortable to use the flipper tab. The flipper tab feels perfectly organic, and I really appreciate that. As with all bead blasted blades, it feels really smooth, almost kind of chalky smooth up here. This finish will scratch up over time. You're going to get snail trails, but the truth is that on this particular one, in combination with how they've done the tumbling on the titanium here, it's really just going to continue to match more and more and more with the handle. So I don't know that I've got a problem with that. All these edges are nicely knocked down. Nothing sharp here. It's only sharp down at the blade. The blade is wonderfully sharp, and this particular one's been used. It is somewhat thick behind the edge, but I mean, not like so thick that you can't use. I mean, it's definitely still going to slice. It's definitely still going to cut. These are beautifully sharpened, and they're also actually made to be used hard. They run on bearings, but they're definitely made to be taken out and beaten on. I think their lock geometry is great. The knives are unbelievably solid. No play, up, down, left, right. When I got it, this blade had wandered over just a little bit. And so I just, took the opportunity to sort of crank on this side a little bit and kind of adjust this and get it exactly how I wanted. And it was so satisfying to get the blade exactly how I wanted it. Centered up and solid on lockout. I cannot stress that enough, guys. That is so cool that you can do that. It really kind of puts into perspective the attention to detail and the tolerances and things that go into a knife like this when you can adjust things, so intricately to get it exactly the way that you want. And it's really, really cool. You can see back here, there's a lot of shouldering. There's a big chunky stop pin back here, so lots of surface contact. A little sharpening choil there. So resharpening this guy is going to be a breeze. S35VN, which is, of course, a wonderful steel all the way around. Very stainless, edge retentive, tough for stainless steel, and pretty darn, not unbelievably simple to sharpen, but definitely, right, not an M390, not an S90V or anything like that. So yeah, it's perfectly appropriate for a knife like this. I always appreciate that they put that hole in the flipper tab. It doesn't serve any purpose, but it just looks cool, right? The whole thing is busy in terms of the lines. You can call those tactical lines, tactical speed holes, whatever you want, but it's got a certain character to it, and I think that ADV knives are instantly recognizable now. It's not really, to me, these knives aren't really copying anybody. They're their own thing, and the moment, I mean, any of his styles, I see it and I'm like, that's an Andre de Villiers. Definitely, like that's immediately something that I recognize, and I always appreciate that with a maker, that they're so specific, so it's so easy to spot them, right? That you know, right? I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Moving back here, we do have a nice large lanyard hole for people who enjoy lanyards. Love the flat polished hardware. It looks really, really nice. It reminds me a lot of the hardware you see on a Rick Hinderer knife. Nice gear pattern backspacer back here that is, does provide some traction, but it's not overly aggressive. I guess we should talk about this area back here because I'm sure people are wondering, there's some jimping there. Is that a hot spot for a landing zone? No, it's really not. This isn't anywhere near as aggressive as the jimping that's on the back of an XM18. And there's, you're really only coming in contact with that last little jimp there. So I could do this all day. It's not uncomfortable. And then there's a little bit of a glass breaker back here. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it could do that for sure. Pocket clip definitely goes with the knife. I mean, that goes right with the knife. In this case, sculpted titanium. Looks great. It's nice and rounded off back here. I mean, even like the curvatures and things, all the lines follow everything appropriately, right? The area that's milled out for the lanyard hole looks nice. It definitely carries, I mean, it's not a deep carry clip, but it definitely carries deep enough where I'm happy with it. Sometimes these rollerball clips bother me, and sometimes they don't. In this case, this knife can easily be pushed into my pocket and pulled back out with one hand and has excellent retention. That is a super robust pocket clip. And that rollerball, I actually prefer that a little more than the ceramic ball or the steel ball on pocket clips. In some cases, it's done better than others. Both the rollerball design and the ceramic ball design on a pocket clip can be good or bad, just like any pocket clip. I actually really like this. The way that they've done this is just great. You can see the rounding underneath there is just perfect for getting this over your pant material, whether you're wearing jeans or you're wearing some thinner material. I mean, obviously I'm wearing athletic shorts right now. I can tell you this is not a knife that I would carry in athletic shorts, but in jeans, work pants outside, right? Yeah, perfect. This knife is definitely going to stay in your pocket and it's going to look good while it's doing it. Now you can see up here, it says ADV Pathfinder 2017. I kind of like that he keeps everything off the blade. I've become more and more a fan of knife makers who put information and stuff like that right here. It depends on how they do it. Obviously, I don't want a paragraph on anything. If it just said Pathfinder, 2017, or if it just said ADV, it's fine. But the way that they've got this, it doesn't bother me at all. It's not really that big of a deal. And then just S35VN on the blade. Perfect. It does have a steel lock bar insert that doubles as the over travel stop. This one, having been used, seems to have settled in at about 60%. Like I said, completely and totally solid. Easy disengagement, no lock stick, and you can see here that the blade is centered, and that is wonderful. This is a really, really cool knife. And let's talk about ergonomics. This is a small, I'm not going to say it's a small knife. I'm going to say it's a medium-sized knife. But it feels like a full-size knife, both in, just dimensions and, I don't know, overall presentation. The character of this knife is making me feel like it's got a little more presence in the room because it's very aggressive looking. But behind all of that aggressiveness is actually an extremely functional, dependable tool that's made out of premium materials. Now, I wear an XL glove, but I can tell you guys right here, I can comfortably get my hand all the way around the handle of this knife. You are confined to this space, but that is, we're looking at the mini Pathfinder. In the case of the large Pathfinder, if you've got a 2XL glove size hand or bigger, this probably isn't going to work for you. You're probably going to want the bigger one, unless you don't mind. In that case, this would be more of a 3-finger knife for you, but XL size glove hands, yeah, no problem there. This is a wonderful, wonderful tool. I will say that squeezing that really hard, if you're going to be using this knife over and over and over again, that pocket clip, there is a presence there. I'm not going to say that it's the most uncomfortable thing in the world. If you're wearing gloves, no big deal. If you're getting this knife out to make a few simple cuts, no big deal. But if you plan on cutting with this knife for 10, 15, 30 minutes at a time or something, that's going to wear on the inside of your bare hand. So you might want to be wearing gloves. But the knife absolutely is made to be, used outside, used hard, and it's going to hold up to that stress. And, go ahead, beat on it, because at the end of the day, if something, if the pivot decides to maybe back out a little bit or whatever, or just not at the end of the day, probably over a long period of time, guess what? You get to readjust it right back to, exactly what you want it to be in terms of action and lockup. And that's really, really cool. Minimal hardware all the way around. It is a simple titanium frame lock design, but it's just made extremely well. And in the case of the Pathfinder blade, I really think that's probably the best one for EDC in use. This is a really, really cool knife. Again, little nitpicks. I don't know that there's a lot here that I can complain about. It is a thick, chunky knife. It is going to be a little heavier than some people, want to carry, but it's not anything crazy. The pocket clip, is a little tiny bit of a thing while you're holding it. And it's not much of a hot spot, but you're definitely going to notice it. Outside of that, this is exactly what it looks like. This is a well-built tank of a medium-sized titanium frame lock, and it's made in the United States. Unfortunately, this particular version of it seems to be unavailable at the moment. That doesn't mean that it's not going to come back. This one was from 2017, but as I've seen from more recent builds, there's not a whole lot that has changed. These knives originally, in like this configuration and similar ones, like just like a full B blasted blade and titanium scales, they come in at about $390. I have always thought that ADV knives were a great deal considering what they were, right? Between ultra high-end production and mid-tech, full titanium made in the USA, right? S35 VN. Again, people always quick to say, I can get a Wii knife in full titanium and M390 for $260. Yeah, because it's made in China. It costs less to make things there. I feel like I have to say that every single time. And there's simply more that goes into a knife like this. Oftentimes these knives are hand-checked, hand-assembled, hand-tuned, etc., right? Time equals money, especially human interaction with a knife, checking these things over, making sure that they are ready to go, and that they are going to perform the way that was intended by the maker. Yeah, that costs extra money on top of the additional manufacturing costs, for something that's made, something like this that's made in the United States. Do I think this knife is worth it? Absolutely. Absolutely. This is definitely going on my most recommended knives playlist. And I know some people are like, what? It's a $390 knife. It's so expensive. Yeah, I mean, totally. It absolutely is. And I'll never suggest that anybody needs to graduate into, this caliber of the knife world, right? But are you getting $390 worth of knife with this thing? Yeah, in my opinion, you are. I can easily recommend this knife. This was wonderful. And I think this and the large trail boss, I think, to women carry knives in a therapeutic edge, if you're wondering, I think these two are my favorite of the ones that you sent. Guys, that's going to be pretty much it for today's review. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.